Oh, now it's live. All right.
What's up, fish tank people? Dustin's Fish Tanks bringing it to you live with Miss Rachel Oleary, talking some nano fish. I gotta say, I've been in the small tank series, doing nano fish, 5 gallons, 10 gallons, 15 at some point. Totally was like, who can I talk to about small fish to put in small tanks? And Rachel there was the first came to mind. So I hit her up and we decided to bust it out together to talk about some nano fish. For those of you who do not know Rachel Oleary, and I don't know how you wouldn't if you're in this fish tank world, she, also known as Miss Jakes, she's an internationally renowned speaker. She spoke at all around North America, I'm trying to think of a club you haven't spoken to. Internationally, she's going to be speaking in Mexico alongside Fukada, who's the world's best aquascaper, like multiple time champion. So really, really pumped to have her on here. Everyone say hello to Miss Rachel Oleary. Say what's up, Rachel.
Hey guys, welcome to the fish room.
Heck yeah. So we're going to get into talking about nanofish today. We are going to be answering some questions at the end of this, but I really want us to stay focused on kind of the topics that we've prepared for you all. We're going to go about a half hour or so, and then we're going to bust into a little bit of Q&A. So sorry for not getting to your questions. We will do a little bit of Q&A at the end if we have time. Before we start talking about nanofish and your fish room and all that, I'd like to just kind of take the big fish tank step backwards and ask Rachel, like, how did the poison start for you, right? I mean, you've got so many tanks, like, like when did it bite you? Like, how did the fish tank?
I had fish all growing up. My dad had a 55-gallon community aquarium in our living room, and we always used to go to the fish store together and pick out fish. When I left home at about 17, I didn't keep fish at all, but I started my family pretty young. And on my first Mother's Day, my kids, well, I mean, they were infants, so not technically, but we got an aquarium again then. Basically, what I like to say is that I could have either been a crazy cat lady or a crazy fish lady, and, you know, the fish were a better choice for me at this point. One tank quickly turned into many as I got interested in line breeding and the genetics and color heritability of apple snails, and then later shrimp, and then little fish. And it just sort of snowballed into what it is today.
And today, what it is, and I didn't know this until we spoke. I got some notes here. We got am I reading this correctly here? 1175s, 1155s. How many 20 longs? Yep. Give us like a little scope.
Oh gosh.
A little scope of your fish room. We don't need to get into every tank, but just give us kind of the ballpark of what we're dealing with around here, because I don't think people can really see everything behind.
Well, I have the same square footage in my fish room as we have in our living space for our home, and I have 3-tiered stepped racks with 75s on the bottom, 55s in the middle, and 20 longs on top. Then I have freestanding racks of 15s, 20s, 30s, and 10s, as well as a 220-gallon and 150-gallon, and then a bunch of random off sizes sort of all over the place, and then another few thousand gallons outside running.
Wow. And then we're going to talk about husbandry just from like a fish room perspective, since you and I both clearly have been bitten by multi-tank-itis. What are you running? Say you're running central air around there. Give us just kind of some rough, like how you I mean, you know, you're only one person. How do you manage all
that? By spending my entire life down here, it seems like. I have a central PVC loop run by a single 80-watt Alita air pump. I use sponge filtration in all of the small fish and invertebrate tanks. My larger freestanding tanks have their own filtration, and my Oscar Captain Cranky Pants has his own filtration. But otherwise, every tank in the fish room is driven by the same air pump. I like to use the Porette foam sponge filters or Matin filters in my aquariums. I heat and cool the room. I do not heat and cool the individual tanks. And then I have a central timer set up on its own circuit with boxes run all along the fish room for my lights, so that they're on a controlled amount of time.
So you got the so you got a such. So when I did my greenhouse, I had and it was a pain because the guy was doing it, and I had the 4-box setup, and I was like, dude, it'd be perfect if I could have that top right one be on a switch. And so he reran all the wires for that one outlet on there, and it worked out really well. So you have something similar with that?
Yeah, I have my own panel completely for the fish room, so that when come tax time, I can deduct my energy usage off my taxes. And from that panel, I have its own breaker for the lights that have a timer. And then I have boxes run over about every 3 feet, the four plug boxes that are all run to that one timer. So wow. They're all over the fish room. It just makes it really easy to make sure that I'm not leaving lights on to prevent excess algae, to sort of control the energy bill a little bit. My energy bill is about $350 a month. Try and not have it creep up more than that. Now that is also including a welding shop, a swimming pool, 2 energy hog children, you know, so it's really not as bad as it sounds.
Okay. And how long are your lights on, your timers on your lights?
They come on at about 8:40 in the morning. Generally, I try and be down in the fish room working by 9. So I give the fish about a 20-minute wake up period before I start banging around down here. Sure. And then I have them set to shut off between 3 and 3:30 as my children get home from school. So I can go up and say, hey, how are you? Be a mom for a little bit. And then sometimes I'll come back down in the evenings and turn them on for additional feeding or maintenance. But on average, about I guess about 6.5 hours the lights are on.
Perfect. Love it. So we're going to talk about nano fish, small fish, and this is your specialty. But I want to address and really have you address some of the we're talking smaller stuff here. But can you address some of the misconceptions without giving away our grand finale on nano fish?
Well, I think that a lot of folks think, first of all, that small tanks are easier, when really quite the opposite is true. Smaller tanks with that lower volume means there's less dilution, and any change in chemistry happens really fast. So a lot of people are super tempted to get into little tanks, thinking that they don't take up much space, they're relatively inexpensive, you know, they'll be easy to maintain, when in fact the opposite is true. They're way more challenging than the larger tanks. And I think a lot of people also think that if you want to keep little fish, it has to be in a little tank. And that is something that
we will talk,
you know, is up for, we'll talk more about later when we get into husbandry, everything else.
Okay. And then you heat the room. This is something
yes.
that I absolutely loved your video on that, by the way. You're sitting in the big comfy chair and you're just like, we're talking about heaters, and you just bring it to everybody and you're like, yo, I don't run heaters and this, like, and this and this and this. And I don't have a heater in any of the tanks you're seeing down here. So can you touch on that? I know it's a species specific topic, but just from a high level, can you talk about heating or lack of heating in your aquarium?
Absolutely. You know, for me, the risk of failure of heaters, and with the quantity of livestock and the amount of money I have into livestock down here, it's not particularly practical to set up an external regulator for every heater in every aquarium should I go that route. And really, over the years, from studying, you know, where the fish come from, the different seasonal shifts they have, and their thresholds from temperatures, I came to realize that, like, the vast majority of species have a pretty distinct seasonal shift of temperature. And as long as things happen gradually and are kept consistent, it's not as important to maintain that steady ideal temperature unless you're really trying to induce spawning. So for me, I tend to make my room a certain temperature, and based on where tanks are oriented in my room determines how warm they get. Obviously, the ones further up in the air get a bit warmer, so I put the warmer water species there. The ones that are closer to the bottom stay cooler, so I put the cool water species there. Eventually, I'll put in a fish building, and then I'll have a hot room and a cold room. But for now, you know, you can really, I feel like it's just, there are certain species that really do require a heater, but the vast majority of fish really don't, if you know, are keeping your environment in a comfortable level.
Okay. And now, do you keep your room at a certain temp what do you keep your room at, I guess would be a good question. Do you have like a way, because I've been in Bob Grauer's and I'll link his room up, and he heats the whole room and it's like 5,000 degrees. I don't know, you've been to his place out there, but yeah, do you have a certain temp you keep it, and how do you regulate that room?
Well, I have, it's very glamorous, but I have it sectioned off.
Glamorous, Rachel, as we all know.
Right.
We've seen my house or whatever, so yeah.
I have it sectioned off with sheeting. I ran industrial pipe along the barriers between the rooms, and I just hung up large room darkening drapes to sort of hold in some of the heat. I have a door at the top of the stairs, and I try and keep my room in the, around 80 degrees or so. It gets pretty balmy down here in the summertime, but in the winter, I try and keep it around there. And that means my upper tanks are around 78 degrees, my middle tanks are around 76, and my bottom tanks are around 74, nice. Which for the vast majority of species is fine. In fact, sometimes I have a harder time keeping things cool enough for some of the shrimp species and things like that. So that's where some of the freestanding racks came in. I keep them away from the lights, away from the dehumidifiers in the cooler part of the fish room. And okay. I just use a space heater down here in the winter to heat up the room.
And then what are the rough, we're talking a lot about your room, but we are going to get into nanofish, but what are the rough dimensions? Like what's the 30 by whatever? Give me some just footprint. Ballpark.
I don't remember. I don't remember. Well, 4, 8, 12, 6, probably 20 by 30 by 20 by 30, maybe, okay, maybe bigger.
And folks,
that's just the main room.
Okay.
It wraps around and then goes back.
Okay. And then I want to pull this into the way your room is set up, and then tie this back into what you said about small tanks not being as easy. Is the primary, your average size aquarium is 75, 55, right? That's the bulk of your stuff. And the reason behind that is what you just said, but I really want to hit this home for people that are thinking about getting that real small tank. I mean, we've seen how the 5-gallon costs $18 and the 10-gallon is, I remember buying one for $199, but can you just kind of hammer that home on the size? Because you're dealing with a lot of volume of water, but you're dealing with them in 55, 75 primarily. So I just want to retouch on that.
Yeah, and part of that too is that I'm a business as well. I'm not just a hobbyist. And so when I get in a new species of fish, I keep everything in species specific aquariums, and I'm getting 600 of them. I'm not getting, 10 to 20. So I like to use the larger volume aquariums simply because, they're easier to maintain, more dilution is always better. And you can really fit a lot more fish into them.
Okay.
But my average tank size is larger, and I really prefer it that way.
Yeah, and I'm with that. The 4 foot is my standard footprint. I have 3 125s, I don't know, 5 or 6 75s, and a couple 55s in the greenhouse, and a 90. And it's just the 4 foot easier to light, more room to screw up and what have you. So I'm totally with you there. Shout outs to having 1175, sister. That's hats off to you. But let's get into the fish. Okay. And I want to just take this, just a quick story on how I first ever heard about you. I don't know if she still keeps fish, but she was on the monster fish keeping board. Her name was Jen. And I actually went to Peru with her. And she was like, "You're into Planet Tanks. You ever heard of Miss Jinx?" And I was like, I've heard of her, but I don't know. She's like, "She's got the mohawk." And this was in 2012. And that's when I first heard about you. And as we're pulling fish out of the Amazon. So I want to kind of go into some of the beginner nano fish and why these are. I know you've got a few of them selected. I also know you wrote a book with Mark Denaro. Is that how you say it?
I did. Yes, yeah. Mark Denaro.
And he sold me my first pair, or a 5-pack of Melatonea Fredricki rainbows that were just baller. He didn't even know the name of them when I bought them from him at a ACA a long time ago. And then, of course, they were wild caught fish. They were beautiful, and they like to jump. So they one by one suicided on me. But can you talk about some of the youngest kid ever is getting into it? He's only got a 10-gallon tank. Just break it down to the hardcore, numero uno spot with beginner stuff.
For a 10-gallon, you said?
We'll say 10. I'm open to your suggestions of, hey, if the beginner starts with nanofish, he should start where, and kind of break us down from there if you want to go 20 or whatever.
Well, a lot of it boils down to what we're saying is nano, because the good choices for a 10-gallon are massive. Pretty much everything in my book can work in a 10-gallon, but the choices for a 5-gallon are a lot more limiting. Some of my favorite fishes, which I'm not going to show all these, but I think one of the best bomb-proof beginner fish ever for a 10-gallon aquarium is the simple white cloud. I mean, you can find them at any store. They're hardy. They don't require a heater. They don't require anything special. They'll eat anything, and they're really beautiful when they're in good condition. Now,
White House,
you know,
that's a no heater. That's a no heater fish too, right?
That's a no heater fish.
Okay.
And I think sometimes for a beginner, getting something that is a little more flexible is good. Now, I also think that there's some really wonderful fish that are relatively easy to find that do great in a 10-gallon. Things like Habrosis cories, the little. Whoops, that's the.
You talk.
The little. This is the Habrosis cory. They're a little tiny salt and pepper cory from South America, and they only get about an inch. They've got a really interesting active behavior. They'll breed well if they're kept happy. Pygmaeus are also wonderful, and then you can pair them with a really small tetra like Ember Tetras, which you can find almost anywhere. That's these orange guys. They are a great, great little fish. They get a bit broader bodied. One of my absolute favorite tetras for a small aquarium, though, I just wrote about these for the Aquatic Gardener magazine, is the green neon tetra, Parachirodon simulans. They're not quite as easy to find, though they've been gaining popularity like crazy in recent years, but they're a fantastic one.
Now, let's stay here for a minute. I'm going to be talking. I've got oodles of videos about neons. What's up with the green neon? Like, what's the draw? Give us, like, why would someone want to keep a green neon over just a regular neon tetra or a cardinal?
Well, the thing that's really nice about them is that they only get about an inch, so they're a bit smaller, and their color extends all the way from their eye the whole way through to the caudal peduncle, which is that tail fin.
Okay.
And instead of it being super gold and red, they have almost like a gold overlay over their whole body, which gives them a green cast. And almost every time people come into my fish room, they'll see them from across the fish room and say, "What are those?" So they're just really sparkly and active. They're fantastic directional schoolers. They look beautiful against live plants. And again, easy to feed, but they have a pretty low prey drive, so you can often combine them with things like shrimp. Now, they'll eat some baby shrimp, but they don't have a particularly strong prey drive. So if, most new people really want that colorful community, and I feel like these are really colorful and decent for a small community.
Now, did you say they have a shimmer to them? They have
they have like a gold overlay. When I take macro photography of them, you can see just the green gold cast across their entire body. And with overhead lighting, it shows up like an iridescent green color. It's absolutely beautiful.
Okay, I didn't know that, and that's one of those fish that I had. Somebody recommended diamond tetras to me, and I was like, gray fish, whatever. And then I got them underneath the halide, similar kind of thing. Okay, I didn't know that about them. I'm glad I asked. So, all right, we got those. What are some others? We love that you nailed the Cory cats. The Cory cats are fantastic. Those small ones. You got any other on like the real beginner, basic, super small tank type fish?
Well, I think that probably the most popular seller and the best one for a smaller aquarium, those 5-gallon tanks, is the chili Raz Bora.
Nice.
Now, whoops. That's the chili Raz Bora. There are 4 or 5 different Borara species commonly available in the hobby. The chili's just the reddest one, so it's the most popular. And they are not as much directionally schooling as tetras are, but they, again, can take a wide range of temperatures. They look fantastic. Despite their small stature, they're really easy to feed, and they're just gorgeous. And again, these are a fish that only gets, maybe 3/4 of an inch. So in a 5-gallon aquarium, you can easily fit 8 of them, and then even add some shrimp.
Where are those from? I had never even seen those until I saw them.
They're from Borneo.
Okay.
From like the southwestern part of Borneo, that particular species. Like the micros are from Thailand, and the Europhthalmoides, or the ones that are an exclamation point, have a really wide distribution. So it's all over really.
They're pretty hardy, the chili Raz Boras. I don't think I've ever seen them in a shop, and if I did, they were discolored, and I didn't.
Well, one of the reasons I'm in business is because the vast majority of shops, their filtration is not really set up for tiny fish. and you know, you throw them in a big system that has a strong pool and they just get sucked through the overflows. So a lot of stores, unless they're not, you know, directly set up for small fish, don't carry small fish. And often a lot of times small fish don't come with a live arrival guarantee. So it's a big gamble for a store. And that's one of the reasons that I started doing what I do, is that I was trying, you know, I was working with all these shrimp and I really wanted fish that I could try with my shrimp to see what would happen. And there wasn't any within a 4-hour drive. So I started importing, but when you import, you get 600 and I would want 12.
Right.
And that's how I started selling, is so that I could get the stuff that made my inner fish geek sing. And then I'd have to sell off the extras. And then from that money, I could get more things that I thought were really neat or I wanted to learn about or whatever.
It's a vicious, poisonous, awesome cycle there we have.
It's fun. Another one I really, really like is Microdevario cubatai, which is the neon green Raz Bora.
Bring it.
Which are these guys. I have, I really, really like these. Now these can be a bit more, fragile upon import. Often they come in really pale, really thin, and not looking super fantastic. But if you get them in, you get them eating, and you get them stabilized, which should really be the retailer's job, then they ship great and they do awesome in your aquarium. And the thing I like best about a lot of these Raz Boras and Danios is that they're very, very breedable despite their small size. So if you have a heavily planted tank with lots of layers of planting and you add these fish and you're feeding them well and maintaining your quality, they just start breeding for you. And to me, that's always exciting. It's sort of like flowering plants. Whenever you see fry, you know you're doing something right.
That's awesome. Do you have any other beginners, or I have another question for you? Do you have any others that you're like, you want to just make sure people know about or see?
Oh, you know, there's so many. I mean, there's so many. I guess another one that I think, you know, everyone always wants their little centerpiece fish, which I think is sort of an antiquated notion, but that's a conversation for another day. But if you want that little sassy sort of centerpiece fish, I think one of the most appropriate ones is the red Flame Dario. And I'm not talking about Dario, the scarlet baddest. I'm talking about the red Flame Dario. These guys here. And the reason I like these better is because it's very easy to find both sexes of that fish. And they'll also often take frozen or prepared foods, whereas Dario tend to prefer live, and it is exceptionally difficult to get females. And these little guys are only just over ½ an inch, but they think that they are a 5-inch fish. They are in your face and sassy and just really, really fun. And they look awesome with those little chili Raz Boras.
You got those in stock?
No, but I will Sunday.
Okay. Those are tight. Okay. So I want to go with you, or I don't know, figuratively or whatever, down to South America.
Okay.
And talk about some South American cichlids and some apistos and kind of how that all works. We had a conversation offline about it. So break it down for me and us, if you could, on the like a South American setup with some nanofish.
Well, no matter what region we're talking about, I think what's really important to think about is, and to research, is sort of how these fish live and behave in the wild and what makes them comfortable, what makes them behave the way they do. And specifically the other day, we were talking about South American fishes and how, you know, apistos can be so shy or tetras can be so shy and high. And we had a little bit of a dialogue. And one of the things that I pointed out was that in the wild, often you'll see layers of fish. So for instance, in Peru, you'll see hatchet fish or pencils up at the surface, which then make the tetras in the middle feel more outgoing because they can tell that there's no predation from above if those top level fish are out and about and swimming. Or for instance, Coreodoros, if Coreodoros are all over the place, the fish above them will know that there's no big shadows overhead, and it just gives them a sense of security. The thing with a lot of really tiny fish is that they know they are a low man on the totem pole for the food chain. So in order to really get them to exhibit their best behaviors and be outgoing, we have to think about stocking by levels and in appropriate numbers. And I think South America is a really good representation of that. But even all over Asia and anywhere fish are found, you know, whether it's the overhanging emergent riparian growth or the layers of fish, we have to sort of figure out what makes them comfortable if they're not behaving the way we like in our aquariums.
All right, and you want to, I want to pivot on there because we talked about South America. You want to give another region or whatever, and like a layers of fish for break it down for people.
Well, for instance, you know, for like a loose Asian stocking, I would do something like orange hatchets, which are Laubuca datibarjori. They're really cool little false hatchet fish from Asia. And I think they're absolutely gorgeous, but they're absolutely fearless too. So if you pair them with something like some of the smaller Danios, which are notoriously shy, the Danios will be way more outgoing. And if you're not particularly concerned with grouping by loose region, little fish like the CPDs that everyone loves, the Celestial Pearl Danios, can become much more outgoing, even combining with things like Endler's live bearers, which are South American, but of an appropriate scale.
Okay, and this is I want to hammer home on this, and then I want to talk about this kind of will take us right to our conclusion here, and we might have time for Q&A. But the thing that I found, and I really want you all to take away from this, with Rachel breaking it down so eloquently for us, is that with these little fish, when you have and I don't want to call them dither fish, but just other fish around that let the smaller fish know that everything is okay. Right, like there's the fish above them, and they're like, okay, those guys are up there, we're cool, all right, we're cool, and there's a different behavior at that level, and those you know, tetras signal to the cory cats, hey, it's okay, because when you get to that level and you have that community fish behavior, if you will, where they're all knowing what the other one's telling them, and in turn is, you know, chilling everyone out or not chilling everyone out. I think that's something that people should strive for, because I think you'll have a better, you know, your tank, when you stare at it, you'll just have a way cooler, I don't know, community.
It's way more fun to see fish interact in a way that shows that they're comfortable. Their color is better, their behavior is better, they're more outgoing, they're more visible, they eat better. You know, more is always better with little fish.
All right, and then this is something that she and I both agree on, and I want to get your thoughts on it. It's kind of as we kind of wrap this up, talking about nano fish, numbers, size of tanks, and just break it down for us on you know, we talked about this offline about little tanks, little fish, and different sizes.
Right. I honestly think that little fish should be kept in as big a tank as possible. In fact, I consider my 150-gallon aquarium a nano aquarium, not because the aquarium is nano, but because all the inhabitants are. There is nothing quite like seeing 200 or 300 of a species schooling or shoaling together, interacting with their environment, and just killing it with color and behavior.
I can't emphasize what she's saying enough. I've had the 220 for years, and I don't think I've ever had a fish in it bigger than a Bozeman rainbow, and that was considered big for me. And I just think that if people, you know, everyone, certain folks would say, you have a 100-gallon aquarium, why don't you get like that foot-long fish? I would take, you know, 100 of one species over a foot-long fish in a you know, 100-gallon or 125.
Well, I do keep those big fish too, so I definitely understand their appeal.
But yeah, but you see what I'm saying, like,
yeah.
Oh my! I was poisoned with I pounded 40-50 neon tetras in a 40 tall in college, and it was just I got the unique tetra behavior where they would all just kind of sit in like little pairs and kind of were all over the place. So I totally agree with her on that. I think that you are well served to get a giant school of one maybe two types of fish. Do you have any particular examples of fish that you're schooling at like 100 fish level or anything? I mean, I know there's a bunch of fish, but are there some that you stick out like you got to see these in the school?
I think that dwarf pencilfish in particular, no matter the species, are absolutely incredible in large groups. Right now I have about maybe 80 Nanostomus marginatus, which is just the simple, inexpensive dwarf pencilfish, in a 55-gallon with like 10 apistogrammas and a giant group of Habrosus cories, and it's absolutely breathtaking.
That's awesome. Cool. Well, folks, this has been a blast, dude. Thank you so much for coming on here. I love talking all these little fish with you. We'll do a little bit of Q&A. Rachel, I'll let you serve up the questions you want to serve, and then we'll wrap up. And by the way, everybody go check out her channel if you haven't already. it's Miss Jinx is your channel, right? You look.
That's correct.
All right, you look up Rachel Oleary. I just want to make sure I got it right, and I'll put the link in the profile as well, and I'll link up some videos of hers throughout this dialogue, so you guys can go and check that out. No, those of you not watching this live, but if you want to go do a little bit of Q&A, I'm all for it, sister.
Sure. Mike Simmons just asked if pencil fish would go well with rams, and they absolutely will. One thing with rams, though, is you really have to make sure you're keeping them warm enough, or they just don't do well. Christy asks if I'm going to Chicago. I am not. My husband's having major surgery, so I'm sticking close to home this fall. Okay. What color CPDs do I get? As far as I know, they only come in one color. Does anybody else have any specific questions?
Any other questions for Rachel? Okay. Sweet.
Cardinal versus neon. I pick green neon all day long. All
right, and then I gotta give you credit on that, sister, because I didn't know the draw. No one ever told me they have a diamond sheen, Dustin. Like, I didn't know that they had like a glisten to them. So that
well, I don't know if you're a member of the AGA, but if you are,
I'm rocking the AGA shirt.
Oh yeah, you are, boy.
Yeah, man. I didn't make it to this year's because I had knee surgery, so couldn't go.
Well, in the next issue of Tag, I actually did an article on green neons, and there's a pretty good picture in there that shows that color that I'm talking about.
Okay, wonderful.
So,
and then I've got one last question, then we'll wrap this up. Talk about pea puffers for me.
Pea puffers. Everybody loves the pea puffers. What do you want to know? I mean, they're fantastic. I personally
want to know, A, you got any, and B, how can I get some? Is what I was looking at your old video. I want to get some of those. They look wicked.
I should be getting more in within 2 weeks. I don't get those in a whole lot because it's really difficult to house a whole ton of aggressive little puffers together. And I can't really justify spreading them throughout the whole fish room. And pairing them with other fish can be very hit or miss. I kind of think puffers are a lot like bettas in that they have very unique individual personalities, and you can have one that's super chill. Like I have one in my 150 gallon. It's never nipped a fish. There's shrimp breeding everywhere, and that one's totally chill. And then I've had some that are just in a seek and destroy mission. So everyone always asks me for sort of blanket answers about that fish. But the reality is there's not good blanket answers. I find if you can keep more females than males, they do better. You can mix them with small, fast-moving Danios, but you always want to have a backup plan when you're combining them with other fish. I've kept them with shrimp. They'll obviously eat the baby shrimp, but they generally leave the adult shrimp alone. I think they're really fascinating. Definitely awesome in a really heavily planted aquarium, which is especially critical to break up that line of sight for when the males are feeling a bit sassy. They're great little fish, but they're a challenging one. They've got some specialized needs.
Okay, cool. Well, Rachel, sister, thank you so much for coming on. I had a blast doing this. If you guys enjoyed this, please drop a comment, give us a thumbs up, or more importantly, go check out her channel. Rachel, give people the breakdown on your channels. What are you doing Tuesdays, Thursdays? Give us just a quick kind of your breakdown of what you do on your channel.
Absolutely. Every Tuesday, I do a Tuesday tip, which is either something I've learned about aquariums, building aquariums, or my summer tubbing season. On Thursdays, I do more of an informal video. There will be one coming out this afternoon if you wanted to see those pencils and things. And then on Sundays, every Sunday, I do a species spotlight on either a fish, an invertebrate, or a plant that I think is appropriate for our hobby. And sometimes monster spotlights, but almost always on nano species.
So I got to get her back on to talk about plants. We should talk about some monsters. I know you got those cool gar. I saw that video the other day. So cool, everyone. Well, listen, thanks everybody for hanging out this afternoon. It's been a riot. If you're enjoying this, subscribe. Make sure you check out Rachel's channel and subscribe to that. There'll be a link in the comments. She also does sell a lot of these cool fish. So yeah, everybody have an awesome one. And drop me a comment on what you thought about this. Any questions you've got, check out Rachel's channel as well. And tank on, everybody.
Thanks for having me, and congrats on 100K, Dustin.
Thanks, dude. It's a ride. It's fun. I was doing the small tank series. You're the first person that popped in my head, so we'll do it again.
Excellent.
You're good, everybody.